For a lot of people, anxiety, particularly around putting yourself out there and building your personal brand online, can lead to paralysis and a life of standing still. Letting life pass you by, waiting for the perfect time to take action, is a powerful recipe for a life of regret. It's also exactly what life looks like for a lot of people. But if you're listening, thinking that building your online influence and a massive following is only for the alphas, then think again. Ian Paget joins me this week on the podcast to tell me how he built Logo Geek while struggling with social anxiety. He's a fantastic role model and a great case study in how ordinary people can do extraordinary things online if they just take the first steps and start. Hi there and welcome back to Amplify, the Digital Marketing Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Bob Gentle, and every week I'm joined by amazing people who share what makes their business work. If you're new to the show, then take a second right now to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes, and you can grab some older ones when you're done with this one. Don't forget to join our Facebook community. Just visit amplifyme.fm/insiders and you'll be taken right there. So welcome along and let's meet Ian. So this week, I'm delighted to welcome Ian Paget to the show. Ian runs a website called logogeek.com. Ian, welcome to the show.
Hey Bob, it's really great for being on here. Thanks for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. I think I've met you a couple of times and never really had the time to sit down and speak to you. So this is...
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because we've met quite a few times at events, but we it's always been when there's been so much going on, so it's nice to actually stop and chat properly.
Yes. So your business is called logogeek.com. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Usually I ask people to tell me a little bit about who they are, where they are, and the kind of work you do. So let's start there.
Sure. Well, I mean, you can ask me to go into more detail, but as a high level point of view, Logo Geek, it started out originally as a hobby, but now it's my full-time business, and it's offering logo design and graphic design services to clients. But then there's another part of it where I work on a community and a podcast specifically for other designers, because I've always been really passionate about logo design, branding, and so on. So ironically, the name Logo Geek works for both sides of that. I can go into the whole detail of how I started it and everything if you wanted me to, but I'll let you steer the conversation.
I want all of that. So I think where I guess to maybe expand on what you were talking about there, I work with lots of people in lots of different kinds of business, and a lot of the time I'm telling them to do what you've done, and it's often very difficult to paint the picture of the impact that can have. Mm-hmm. So I would like to really look at your story, because I think it's a brilliant case study of a creative person that could easily have just gone to work in an agency or set up his own agency and bimbled along the bottom, same as everyone else. But you haven't done the same thing as everyone else. You've done something actually quite courageous, and knowing you're quite an introverted person.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, very much so.
So to put yourself out there in the way that you've done is very courageous. And I would probably, having examined everything you've done now, use you as a case study when I'm talking to clients. Mm. So I would like you to tell your story. So if you maybe before Facebook groups, before podcast, sure. What did your life look like then?
Okay, so, well, I've been a graphic designer for quite a length of time. I didn't actually study graphic design at university, but it was something that I really wanted to get into. So I think as a starting point in terms of the story of how I led to where I am today, it's probably worth explaining how I got my first job as a graphic designer. So obviously went to school. I was really interested in art and design. I then moved on to college in the UK, which again was focused on mainly art-based topics, but none of it included graphic design. I didn't have any knowledge at that point of all of the softwares like the Adobe Suite, which is one of the industry standard tools. So in terms of leaving education, I didn't have any of the skill sets needed. And I do remember my careers advisor at college basically telling me that it's impossible to do what I want to do unless I do go on to further education. But I'm the youngest of quite a big family. I mean, split between two families. I'm actually the youngest of 10 children, and my daddy he would be in his 90s now if he was still alive. But he always told me, all my other kids, they didn't go to university, so you won't. So I never had any expectations of going to university. What I planned to do was finish college at 18, go out there and find a job. And I wasn't that motivated to get anything in particular. I probably would have been happy working in a supermarket, but I did kind of persist looking for something that was creative, and I was quite lucky early on to get a print finisher job. So rather than working on the graphic design side of it, it was within a small company that would take the work that they was doing, that they would print off and then finish it off. So that was kind of like my entry point into seeing how graphic designers works. They had a couple of guys in their team, and I realized quite early on, and I would have been about 18 at that point, that I didn't want to do the print finisher stuff. It was using scalpels, knives, carrying stuff. It was quite labor intensive, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the other side of it, and I used to ride a moped to that job, had an accident on it, and it meant that I just needed to find the first job that I could. And I don't know if you believe in fate. I don't, but I mean, if I did believe in fate, that would be one moment in my life that kind of steered me in the direction, because what I needed to do was leave that job and get the first job I could. I still would live with my parents at that point, and basically got the job at the first place I could. So I asked my friend, and I got a job as a warehouse in a warehouse. Not what I wanted to do, but it was a job. I got paid money. I was planning to stay there temporarily and look for something else. And because I was already working for someone else, I had my interview really late at that company. I think it was about 6 p.m. And rather than having it with the warehouse manager, it was with I can't remember what her title was, but the second down from CEO in a big international company. And I believe I told her I would like to work in graphic design at some point, but at the moment I want to do this job so that I can improve my teamwork building skills. I made something up just to try and get the job, and I do remember her writing that down. And I was in that warehouse job for, I can't remember how long it was, maybe 6 months, and I got invited to work in their office department in a it was called product support and education, and a very small percentage of what they did as a team was what could be deemed as graphic design. So I got moved into that team. Lots of it was admin type stuff, like booking hotels, basically supporting the international sales team, and I was not very good at that. like you said earlier on, I've always been quite an introverted person. So the moment the telephone used to ring, I felt sick, and I was just so nervous. So I failed miserably at that. But what I was very good at, and what they recognized that I was good at, was helping with the leaflets and the posters. I mean, at that point, what they did as a company was almost like stick drawings, just to show how these products would be laid out. But because it was something that I really wanted to do and I was really excited about it, I'd never used any of the software before, but I was given a really old Mac and a reasonable PC, and it had the software on it. And what I would do is I'd go home every evening and try and work out how to do these things, and then I go back in the next day and show what I've learned. And I started to cobble together some basic knowledge of graphic design. And after my 3 month, was it 3 months or 3 weeks? I had a trial period. I think it might have been 3 weeks. They saw potential in me, and they gave me a full-time position within that team. And what I didn't realize at that company, what they would do is that team would basically mock stuff up and send it over to a freelancer. Now, I didn't know that. So when I got given a leaflet for print, I did the whole thing from start to finish, and it was all print ready. And obviously that saved the company a lot of money. I mean, bear in mind, I was a young guy. I was probably about 19 at that point. I would have been on minimum wage. I wouldn't have been paid much at all. And I probably saved them thousands of pounds. So they were kind enough to do this collaboration with the local print company. So where they got all their brochures and stuff printed, I could go there every week for an hour for a number of weeks and just go there and ask questions. So I would just go there and be like a sponge. And I was in that company for about 5 years. I developed skill. So by the end of that 5-year period, I went from knowing nothing about graphic design to being able to do product illustration, proper print-ready artwork for print. We had a photo studio. It developed from, like I said, it was 10% graphic design, that team, but that team in that 5-year period went from being almost like a proper in-house graphic design team, and I was key to that development at that point. But yeah, so I moved on from there. I went to it was a web design agency, and I would deem that as a proper graphic design job. Yeah. Working for lots of different companies. I was thrown in the deep end, and it was actually at that company where the occasional project was a logo, but not enough that I could ever get really good at it. So it was mostly web design, but then like once a month or once every 2 months you get a project come along, and I always enjoyed that. And in the at the medical company I mentioned, I used to really love the product illustration. That was my favorite thing. I would have happily become a full-on illustrator. So there was a number of skills that I enjoyed, and that's kind of where in terms of the skill set came from. But on the side of my job, what I've always done from day one is create projects for myself to get really stuck in and to develop my skills. So when I was at college, I used to do a lot of like I wanted to be a fantasy illustrator at that point, so I used to write stories and do drawings. But that opened up a door to something else, because I used to go to this club in the local town for children, where they could make games and movies and stuff like that. So I used to volunteer there, but all the work I was doing on the books and stuff just for fun, I was showing that to the guys that ran that. And at that point they were animators, now they're game developers. And I wanted to get involved with what they were doing. Yeah. They just started making apps. That was something that I was interested in. It used a lot of the skills that was in my full-time job, and I showed them some bits, and we started building. I did a few game backgrounds, did a few menus and things for some of the apps, but they come back to me and said, Ian, we love working with you. If you ever have a good idea, come to us. So I pitched this game to them. I came up with a whole concept. I did a whole plan for how it could work, and they thought it was a great idea. So all of us together, in our own spare time, kind of fun, started working on this game. It was eventually pitched to Chilingo, which is run by EA Games, so it's a huge company, and we worked on that project for a long time. It was about over a 4-year period, but what that got me into was the habit of going to work, and then coming home, working on something, working over the weekends. Anytime I had some spare time, I'd work on this huge project. So it was doing animations, it was doing characters, backgrounds, all sorts of stuff. It was great fun. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I got into the routine of working. So when that project was done, I remember saying, I never want to do any big project at home again because it was exhausting. It was tough because I at that point at the end of that 4-year period, I was in that web design job. I'd been promoted to director, so it was quite a demanding job. But then I was coming home and also working, so I was doing a lot. I felt really stretched. I felt quite burnt out. So I did actually say I don't want to do any more projects. But then a short period of passed by. I think it might have just been like 2 weeks or a month, something like that. And I I had that bug. Like I really wanted to work on something. I felt like I had a bit of a rest. Now I want something new. I just didn't want a long-term project. And a friend mentioned to me, Ian, you're really good at logo design. Because, like I said, I did the occasional logo in my full-time job. I was really good at illustration, and I thought that sounds good. I like logo design, and I've got a strong interest in it, and I wanted to learn more about it. And at that time, I didn't want to turn it into a business. This was just for fun. So I'd learned a bit of SEO knowledge at the agency I worked on. When you work for a web design agency, you just pick up all this stuff from different teams. So I wanted to set up a website where I could post what I was learning and share some of the work that I've done. And I remember writing down lists and lists and lists of domain names. Now there's loads of available domains, but at this point there was only the .coms and the .co.uk's. You needed to choose from there, and I wanted logo or logo design in some way to be in the domain, because at that point that was one of the ranking factors for SEO. It's not anymore. I mean, that's all irrelevant now, but I wrote down hundreds of names. All sorts of different things. One of them was Logo Geek. So I went through this list, not available, not available, not available, not available. And I literally was expecting that one to be gone. But the .co.uk was available for logogeek.co.uk. Like there wasn't any strategy behind it. It was just the domain was free. I've always been a big nerd. I've always gone to Comic-Con. I am a big geek. I'm like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. So I don't know. I thought, yeah, that could do. I'll register that because it's a good domain. .co.uk's don't cost much. They're like, I think it was like £6 then for the whole year. It was reasonably cheap. And that's kind of how that started. So I just started now and again working on this website. It wasn't a real focus. But I found once I built that website and I was sharing with other people that I was doing this thing, I got a couple of projects from friends. I didn't charge much at all. I think like £50 or £100 back then, which is really cheap for a logo. But I take on those projects, I stick them on my website, and then like old work colleagues, that I don't really speak to anymore, they started getting in touch. And then I think it was the result of just posting things and sharing it on social media. I unexpectedly got an email from someone I didn't know. And that wasn't something I ever planned or ever expected. I didn't even think real people would look at my website, so it actually had spelling mistakes on it. There was parts of it that didn't work. It was just a website thrown together for fun in WordPress, and I got that first client, and that was a big moment, because that really opened up this thing of like, oh my god, I can actually make some extra money from this. I felt at that time I was paid reasonably well in my full-time job. So doing this extra thing, it's like if I want that games console, I can buy that games console. If I want to go on that holiday, I can. It opened up this. I just saw the money. It was great. So yeah, that's when I started to put a little bit more focus on the website. I started to post frequently on Facebook at first, then I moved over to Twitter, and then I started getting invited because of the work I was doing on Twitter in particular. I was posting daily and interacting with people. My audience started to grow on there. So I started to get invited on juries, and because I was invited on juries, I was getting backlinks. And it just kind of started a domino effect. I started to get more inquiries coming in, getting more calls, and it got to a point, like this was probably about 8 years ago when I first started it, but it got to a point where it just got ridiculous. I'd be at work in my full-time job, and my phone would be ringing, clients, or I'd get loads of emails coming in, and I went over a long period of time not knowing which direction to go. My goal as an individual was always to work for other people and to always climb the corporate ladder, and so to improve my portfolio, maybe go and work for a London design agency, and then maybe become like a proper creative director, and go up the ranks in the agency world. But just because of this whole Logo Geek thing blowing up, I got to a point where I felt like I needed to choose between the two. I kept choosing work because it's like that's what I wanted to do, but then I couldn't give up the other thing. So it was always in this like ditch, like I couldn't pick either one, and it was horrendous. But what I ended up doing, and it was for personal reasons why I ended up doing it. My mum, she died of vascular dementia, so I saw the effects of dementia and age, and I would go and see her in the care home, and I got to this point where I didn't want to regret anything. I don't want to regret anything in life, so that's why I decided, what, I'm going to hand in my notice. So I handed in my notice. They offered part-time. I accepted part-time. That was a great deal. So I did that for 3 years. Fast forward 3 years, back in January this year, I decided, what, I'm ready for this. I'm going full-time. So now here today, I'm full-time doing this. I've got my podcast, got my community, working on all sorts of stuff for Logo Geek, and I have absolutely no regrets. I've just got Cambridge, the University of Cambridge, as a client on my own, which is phenomenal, to work on a logo project, which I never thought would happen, and I'm making more money than what I used to, which is amazing. And I'm just at this point now where I'm realizing that I can control my destiny completely, and I'm like, I want to do a magazine series, I want to do like books, I want to do training courses. I got loads of ideas, but that's pretty much of how I got to that, and I'm happy to go into more detail in any particular area if you want me to. Yeah,
I think to risk a Big Bang Theory quote, all of that from the effectively fun with flags.
Yeah,
that's yes, outstanding.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've literally said that before. Like, oh dear God, I am basically like real life Sheldon. I built fun with logos,
yeah.
But I've turned it into a business. I honestly thought Logo Geek as a company name would ever be taken seriously. So to be able to work with serious clients now, and to get so many inquiries, and to be seen as someone who's influential as a graphic designer, and to be taken seriously by so many people is just phenomenal. I never expected that. I thought I would have to create a separate brand, but yeah, Logo Geek it is, and it's doing well for me at the moment.
I think there's a couple of places I would like to explore with you, and the first one is the Facebook group, because sure. you didn't mention that, but you have a massive Facebook group, and everybody kind of assumes if you want to be big on social media, you have to be out there, extrovert, confident, constantly blowing your own trumpet. Mm-hmm. But that's just No, you. So I'm curious to understand how that Facebook group came about, how you grew it, or how it grew you.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think it needs a little bit of backstory because the Facebook group just didn't come out of nowhere. So, in terms of social media, I brushed over it in my story, but I originally started posting stuff on Facebook. Because I thought if I share things to do with logo design on Facebook, I get clients. But that didn't work. I just got followed by other graphic designers. But I actually liked posting stuff. It was great. I'm into graphic design. I liked finding resources and reading it and then sharing what I was learning. It was like keeping a backlog of things that I found. So I kept doing that. I enjoyed it, even though it wasn't actually bringing any clients. So I felt that never really served its purpose. But in my day job, I always said to the CEO and the company director, we really need to do social media marketing. Like, I was really pushing it. Like, they did everything else. They do all the cold calls, all the really pushy sales tactics on the phone, but they never did any of the social media marketing. And I was learning a lot about social media in my own time, and seeing the power of it in terms of interacting with people and getting your business out there from a research perspective. So I saw the value in it. But anyway, because I kept banging on about it, they did an interview with someone that came in to work in their online marketing team. But this person, their real strength was growing social media numbers. So they had thousands of followers on Twitter. I think they had like 50,000 followers, and they was one of these early influencers that if they took a picture of their trainers, other people would go out and buy their trainers. So they hired this girl. They put me in charge of her, which was outside of that marketing team. And together we came up with all these strategies, and she was sharing with me tactics that worked on Twitter. And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder if that tactic would work for Logo Geek. And I mean, it's kind of spammy now, but what that tactic was basically finding accounts similar to yours, following the people that would follow them, and then use these other apps to unfollow the people that didn't follow back. It was really spammy, but I tried it just out of curiosity. I'm always open to trying these things. But early Twitter days, you can't do it now, but early Twitter days, if you clicked on someone's profile and you clicked who was following them, it would literally show you who just followed them. So if you was to follow those people every day, those people were literally just online. I saw it worked really well, really, really, really well. So I made it a rule that every single morning, the first thing I would do would be post something relevant to logo designers, and then find a number of other accounts and follow. Like, there was a rule; it had to be under a certain amount, otherwise you'd break the rules. But I think it was like between 50 and 200 people. So I do that every morning as a routine, no matter what, and probably about 50% of those people follow back. So the numbers on Twitter grew really fast early on, and that opened doors to other opportunities because people started to see me as an influencer. I don't do that now. That tactic doesn't work. I mean, it partly does, but I can explain more in detail if you want me to. But yeah, that doesn't really work now. But what that did do is early on allow my Twitter following to really grow really fast. It's at nearly 100,000 now. Twitter's not as big as what it used to be, so I don't see it growing that much more. But yeah, so that's the part one. So I gained a lot of following on Twitter. So the Facebook group. So I started joining a couple of Facebook groups that came up online. And there was one in particular that was just amazing. I don't know when Facebook groups really exploded, but 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was, maybe about 3 years ago, I saw that they were growing in popularity, and I drew up on my board a plan for everything I would like to do for Logo Geek. And on that list, aside from client projects, was writing a book, creating training courses, creating some kind of community, maybe doing events. I wrote down all these things, and the common thread between all of these things was an audience.
Yeah.
And I thought, in preparation of launching these things, oh yeah, there was a podcast on that list as well. I hadn't yet done that podcast. And I thought, in preparation of launching this thing, what I could do is maybe create a Facebook group, and then in like 2 years' time, when I'm ready to launch this thing, maybe there would be a few hundred people in there. That was my mentality. I literally thought I'd set it up, it would sit there, be dormant for years, but maybe a few years later there might be some people in there. But I created that group, I posted on Twitter, and I think like 300 people joined in like the first hour. It was ridiculous. And all these conversations started happening, and it just went nuts. Was uncontrollable, to be honest. And people kept joining, and it kept growing. And I mean, it's pretty much continued to grow ongoing. But one of the most important things, I think, with a Facebook group that I learned is that you have to moderate it properly, otherwise they go downhill so fast. Especially with logo design, you get a few people that post really bad stuff. I don't mean I don't mean slightly bad. I mean really bad. Like, you see that they have absolutely zero capability. Once you get some of those in there, all the good people leave and go elsewhere. So you have to keep it well moderated. So I just put in a few rules in place for how I think it could work ongoing. And in terms of graphic design, it's definitely, for logo design in particular, I feel it's the best quality group online that's free on Facebook. There's a couple of good graphic design groups, but in terms of logo design as a speciality, I feel because of the care for moderation and it's primarily to do with moderation. I feel that it's gained a lot of respect. It gets mentions on things. Like Will Patterson, he's got a big YouTube channel, and he did a shout out about the group at one point, and that brought in a few extra 100 people. But yeah, it's at almost 10,000 people now. I've got 3,500 people pending still that I need to go through. But yes, it's a lot of work for relatively little return, but I'm learning so much from those people, and it's a good platform to promote other stuff as well. So yeah.
And I've had people with big Facebook groups on the podcast before, but I think you probably are towards the higher end, if not the largest group owner I've spoken to. And a big group doesn't happen by accident. Usually there are some key ingredients in place, and one of them has to be your contribution. So what are you actually putting into the group in terms of value yourself?
Okay, so it's changed over the years. When a group is new, say you create the group, you can get people in, great. People assume that once someone's joined the group, they're going to be active. But actually, Facebook has weird algorithms where if you don't engage with that group, that person never sees those posts. So what you need to do is not just get people in, but get people in and engaging with that content. So there's been a few things that I've been doing over the years. So the group's about 3 or 4 years old. It's not a massively old group, but to kind of kickstart it. So the way I see it is that you kind of built an engine, but you need to get that engine going. because eventually it becomes user-generated content, and it is basically a machine that just runs itself, and that's the point it's at now. I rarely post in it. The posts are in there every single day. It's like 80% active, and it, other than just keeping an eye on it and moderating it, I just kind of I comment now and again, but I don't do as much as what I used to. So to kickstart it at the beginning, what I would do is post like a question or something that people would engage with and interact with. Or I would, something that you can do in Facebook groups is do a shout out to the last 100 people that joined. So you can tag them in a post. Facebook does it pretty much automatically. So you can do a shout out, greet those people, encourage them to post and interact. And once they posted, then they start seeing, the algorithms are like, oh yeah, you're interested in this. They start showing that person more stuff. So if you can get that initial post or that initial interaction from that person, then they're quite likely to stay in. So I've done a lot of things like that. But I think one of the key things that allowed it to grow is that because I moderate really carefully, so it's a closed group, and so there's questions that need to be answered in order for the person to come in. I'm not overly fussy with the people that come in. They just have to be capable of answering a question, and it's amazing how many people are incapable of that. So if they can't do that, they don't get in. If they if they answer the question and their response makes sense, then I'll let them in. I don't have a proper filter. That's literally my metric for letting people in. But I think that as a starting point, that helps to keep some kind of quality. I've got rules in place. So with logo design in particular, there's always historically been so much nonsense where people would post a logo and go, what do you think of this? And you get these comments like, yeah, it's great. That's literally how a lot of logo design groups are. But with logo design in particular, you're not creating a pretty picture. So, I mean, something can look nice and you can evaluate the aesthetics, but if you're going to create a proper group for logo design, then in order to give feedback, you need to provide context. So who is the company? Who are they competing with? Who are you aiming to target? All this sort of stuff. So I had post approvals turned on. That was something I was kind of forced to turn on early on because Fiverr designers will spam the group, but they get booted straight away if any of that's in there. But doing that, posts come in, if there's no context, it gets deleted. So I'm filtering the posts that are coming in with the expectation that they should provide context. And as far as I'm aware, this is the first graphic design group that someone's been that harsh. I was really firm about it. So if people kept posting stuff and they wouldn't provide it, I'd boot them from the group. No questions asked. It's just, I don't want that in the group. I've deleted your posts enough times. You need to learn in some way. So I've been quite firm in terms of how it's been moderated. I've got one other moderator that helps me that just happens to be based in New Zealand. So we've got the 12-hour difference, and he's just as firm on it as me. But yeah, I think that filtering the people coming in the first place and filtering the posts and getting rid of people that cause any issues or anything like that and being firm on it, I think that helps to helps for people that are more experienced to recognize that the group is properly moderated. So you get the good people commenting, you get the good people helping, you get the good people advising, and people recognize that and they see that and they talk about it. It gets shared, and I think there's been a domino effect in that sense, that people recognize it as a good group that is well moderated. So that helps. And then I got the podcast. I promote on the podcast. Any other prior to this call, I mentioned I pretty much say yes to every single podcast because I've suffered from social anxiety and it helps with that. so I mention it everywhere. So I just think it's a mixture of all these things, and now it's grown. It could easily be over 10,000, but I probably, if I said yes to everyone that came in, I think it would be well over 20,000. But I've really been firm on making sure that people that are in there are either good or willing to learn.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a big difference.
No, I had a look earlier, and it is over 10,000 now. I think in that moderation is where the value is, because I think, as you said, if you don't have the context and the landscape that a logo or a brand is existing in, it's impossible to really discriminate and understand how effective it's going to be.
Yeah.
The competitive landscape that a brand exists in is everything.
Yeah.
Well, obviously not.
Yeah,
everything.
I mean, I'd love it if they would provide more information, but I found if you're too strict, no one posts. So in terms of, as a general rule of thumb, as long as there's a little bit, I'll let it in, and people can ask questions, which they do. But I think, sorry, it's something that I didn't add, but you need to create a culture within the group. So, like I said, previously, no one was asking for context in groups. But because I was really pushing on it and being very firm on it and explaining the reason why, it started... I started to see other people saying, "Can you provide more context?" You know, they were recognizing that I was doing it, learning from it, doing that. And now I've since seen, I actually had other moderators of other groups saying, "Ian, the way that you're managing this is really good. I'm gonna copy it." And I've actually seen other groups copy it. I can see that they've copied stuff from the group, like the rules are the same and so on. But it's amazing how you can, once you kind of stand up for something and say, you know, it should be this way, how it creates the domino effect. So most decent graphic design groups are using the same model now, which is a good thing. I'm happy that people have taken note.
So let's look at your podcast.
Sure.
I think that I had a look earlier, and it looks like it's been running for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
Yeah. So I started that in 2017. So it's about 2.5 years, nearly 3 years now, actually. And when I first started it, what I planned to do was just 10 episodes. So I mean, that was totally new for me, and like I said, I've had therapy for social anxiety, so sitting down and recording and interviewing someone is absolutely petrifying. But I worked through that as a skill set. So I picked out names of people that inspired me. So it included people like David Airy, who's the author of a blog and a book called Logo Design Love. I really wanted him on. He hadn't previously actually done any podcast prior to that. I was surprised that he said yes to me. Aaron Draplin, Alina Wheeler, her book was one of my favorites on branding. But yeah, I just decided I'm going to reach out to these people and do this podcast. I mean, that podcast didn't just start out of nowhere. I was invited on another show called Side Gig, because I was speaking with a friend of mine online. He built this business called Milo, and he thought my thing was full-time. I thought his thing was full-time, and we both found out that what we were doing was building a side gig. So he thought it would be fun to do a podcast on that. He managed to get a sponsor for it. He told me it wasn't much money. And yeah, so the three of us, we did a 10-part season. There was no planning to it. We just got together, we wrote down a topic, and we just spoke for an hour, recorded it, edited it, and put it out there. So we did that. I was absolutely petrified doing that. Like, there was actually points in it where the guys were saying, "Ian, are you okay?" And I went, "I just need to pull myself together this end," because I'm like, my heart's just racing. And there was three of us, so I kept getting to this point where I'd listen to the two guys speaking. They're both American. They both have these amazing accents, and I forget that I'm part of this podcast. I'm just listening to them speaking, going, "This is great." and what I'd start doing, because I was nervous, and because I'd be sat there thinking the entire time, I have not spoken in ages, I'd just say something and it's total nonsense. So yeah, so I did that, and I got a little bit better, but I was still petrified doing it. But what what really pushed me was I found out how much money they got paid for this thing. Bearing in mind that we just, three of us just came together and we hit the record button and spoke, which is weird. But yeah, we got paid. I don't know if I'm allowed to say figures, but I'm going to say it anyway. I believe he got paid $500 an episode from a sponsor, and most of that money they used, like he paid editors and hosting and all sorts of stuff. So there wasn't much left over, but we still, each of us got a good few £100 each for just chatting. You know, they're literally friends. We were just speaking for 10 hours, and we got paid. And weirdly, the sponsor of that, they'd actually contacted me in the past to maybe do some promotion through Twitter, and one of the other hosts of that show, he started doing his own thing, and I'm like, maybe I could do my own thing. And yeah, I thought I'd pitch the idea to FreshBooks, who kindly sponsored the podcast, and they've actually sponsored about 70 of the 86 episodes that I've released. So they've been an incredible sponsor for me. I reached out to them originally, hadn't released a single episode, didn't even think I was capable of doing it, but I decided this was not long after my mum passed away, so I was in this weird mindset where I'm like, have to say yes to everything. You know, I can't turn any opportunity down. So that's the reason why I said yes to that, being on that podcast as a co-host. And yeah, I thought, you know, I'm going to create my own thing and see how it goes. And like I said, I only ever planned it to be one season. Didn't really know what I was doing. I had a microphone, but no proper kit. But I did one season, and it was one of the best things I ever did. Personally, and I learned a lot. I know I can talk a lot, like, but I've never been that confident. I've never been very good at conversation. So from a personal development point of view, I recognize that I grew in confidence over that period of time. Anytime I made a mistake with like my microphone setup, I used a Blue Yeti originally, and I didn't realize, but you're supposed to speak into the side of the microphone, not the top. So my first few episodes I spoke into the top, so the quality wasn't that great. I also didn't have a pop filter, so it had lots of and I spoke too close. But every time I did an episode, I'd release it, I learned from it, I'd tweak something, I'd do another episode. So yeah, I did the 10-part season that I always wanted to do. I was lucky enough to speak to people that I admired for years. You know, these are individuals that I pretty much grew up with admiring, and it was just phenomenal to me that I could reach out to individuals, invite them on, speak to them for an hour, and then share that with other people and get paid to do this. So it was great for personal development and all sorts of stuff. So there was so many benefits to do it that I decided, okay, I'm going to take Pat Flynn's, can't remember what it's called, but the smart podcast course that he did.
Yeah.
And I did that course and made a few tweaks to my setup and the software I was using, and improved season 2. And I did a 10-part season 1, then I did a 10-part season 2, and then when I got to season 6, that's when I spoke to FreshBooks about potentially sponsoring 2 seasons back to back. And they actually agreed to sponsor 6 months worth of content. So back in January, since the 1st of January, I've been doing podcasts weekly, and I've got a good routine, and I'm very likely to continue doing a weekly show. So it's been amazing.
I think if you are doing a season-based show, then a weekly show can seem quite intimidating, but actually very quickly becomes routine. Yes,
it does. Yeah, it does. Because I found, so I was doing seasons at first. I think it was like season 5. I finished season 5, and then I I couldn't get FreshBooks as a sponsor right away, but I thought, I just want to carry on. I'm enjoying this, and I started using affiliate. So I carried on back to back, and then I started to see actually there's just a routine to this. Providing you got a backlog of interviews, you just need to set aside like a day a week to edit the show and publish it, and it's just part of my week now. It's just part of my routine. I just put projects around it and push it out. And yeah, I think even before January, I think I might have did maybe 2 seasons back to back. So I've probably been doing it consistently now for about 8 months. And yeah, it's been one of the best things I've ever done, and it's exciting. So I'm so glad I started it. And if anyone was to listen to my podcast and go back to episode 1 versus like the more recent episodes, you can see my interview techniques improved, my confidence has improved, the audio's improved. It now sounds like a proper podcast, whilst at the beginning it was not.
I think that's why you're such a good role model for a lot of people who want to get into the creator space in any way. Because unless you're willing to give yourself permission to not be where you would like to be in the beginning, you'll never get good. And especially in the creative sector, and designers in particular, perfectionism is a real issue.
Yeah,
I work with a lot of designers where they never put anything in their portfolio because by the time they've finished a piece of work, all they can see are the flaws.
Yeah.
And that leads to complete paralysis.
Yeah.
That you've found ways around that.
I think
huge.
I think you have to. I mean, if we're just speaking about work, like graphic design work and your portfolio, you have to show what you've done before. You have to, even if you don't like it. But you have to confidently show it, and if you want a job or you want clients, no one's going to hire you unless they can see that you can do what they want you to do. But for me, in my head, anything like presenting or speaking, I see that in a different way. But it's not really, is it? I think for me, like I said early on, I've suffered from bad anxiety before. I was the type of person I'd go to some kind of event, and when people do like a toast and they hold a glass of champagne, my hand would start shaking, and if I was to drink that glass of champagne, I would spill it all over the floor. My hand was shaking that much. So I had therapy to help with this, and there was a couple of other things, including stuttering. So I've had a stutter when it's not a stutter like some people where they can't physically say certain words. Mine is triggered by anxiety. So for a long period of time, I had this problem where if I was nervous, say like on the phone or whatever, I literally couldn't get some words out of my mouth. So a podcast has helped with the anxieties that come from doing public speaking. I still get quite nervous when I'm actually doing a live thing on a stage, but I have done that and I've got through it. But I found podcasting helps with that. It's helped build confidence, and it's helped with stuttering. And these are things that therapist actually said were very complicated, and he might not be able to solve it, but he can give me the tools to help with that. And hitting that record button, it recreates the sensations of standing in front of a crowd of people to me. Not so much now, but it did at the beginning. So I've gone off your question slightly, but that's one thing that's really pushed me is more personal development, and I think something that's really stuck in my mind, and it was because of my mom. I don't want to get to like an 80-year-old and look back at my life and think, what if? Or I don't want to regret that. And the reality is that in 100 years' time, most people that are listening to this won't exist anymore. And I know that's a slightly morbid way of looking at it, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter what other people think because they're not going to be around at that time. So for me, the need to not regret is greater than the embarrassment of screwing up. And another thing related to that, when I did have therapy and we spoke about public speaking, they asked me the question of, how would you feel if that was one of your friends on the stage and they did mess up? What would you think of that person? And realizing that actually I don't think anything less of them. I just want to support them and I want to see them succeed. It's little things that have helped me aim to develop and improve my skills. So it's not about, I know we're not perfect, but I'm working to improve. But it's that drive to not want to regret that kind of keeps me going, really.
I think that's a great attitude. I really like that. So, of all the things you've got going online, you've got the Twitter, massive following there, Facebook group is huge. Mm-hmm. You've got the podcast. Of all of those things, is there any one thing you could put your finger on and say, this has been the best thing I've done?
Out of everything, I would say the podcast. I mean, it's amazing to think that previously, even now, there's not a dedicated logo design podcast. And I've read a lot of books on logo design, and there's not one central resource. And one of the main reasons is for that is that there isn't one single process. So actually, to be able to interview graphic designers from the legends that pioneered graphic design is amazing. A lot of them are still alive. Graphic design is relatively young in terms of a career. So I'm able to interview some of who could be deemed as pioneers, and obviously the young up and coming people, and to get everyone's perspective on their process and to share that in some way. That's, as far as I'm aware, hasn't been previously done in this way. And I feel like I've created something bigger than me, with the community as well. I mean, it all kind of works together as one. But I actually feel like I'm making a long-lasting impact on my life and other people's lives by creating these things. So, it would have to be the podcast for sure.
Ian, I'm just looking at the time. We should probably bring things to a close quite soon. If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to take things further with you, how would you like them to do that?
Well, I've been quite fortunate that I've got everything under the name of Logo Geek. So in terms of social media, if you just search Logo Geek, you'll find me. But I have a website. I've got pretty much every single social channel. So probably the best place to look is my website, which is logogeek.com.
Perfect. And to bring things to an end, I always must remember to ask this. What's one thing you do now that you wish you'd started 5 years ago?
I would probably say the podcast. Because, like I said, for so many reasons, it's really helped me improve and develop as a person, and I feel it's elevated a lot of skills. So definitely that. And if I'm allowed to cheat and say a second one, earlier in the conversation, I said that earlier this year I went full time. You know what? I should have done this ages ago. I was worried about it failing, but actually it wouldn't have failed because I've had leads come in consistently, and they're still coming in now, and it's always been a passion. And I do regret not doing that further, because I can see now the amount when you sit down and focus on something as an independent graphic designer, you can do a lot in a short period of time if you just sit down and get on with it. So I'm looking forward to see what I would do within the next couple of years, but I do regret not doing it a lot sooner.
I have to agree with that, and simply to supplement it, I think one thing that people who are not running their own businesses often think is, oh, it looks so risky. But actually, if you take a moment and think about it, how many people have to get annoyed with you in your job in order for you to not have a job? The answer is one. Whereas when you run your own business, an awful lot of people have to get very unhappy before you're out of a job. So it's actually much safer.
Yeah. I mean, it is very daunting. It's all the anxieties that come with taking the leap and being in the right place, um, mentally and financially to be able to do it. Like one real benefit for me, and the reason why I did choose to take that leap. I mentioned earlier in this podcast that FreshBooks agreed to do 6 months worth of content. And they basically, at the end of last year, gave me a check for $12,000 that I wasn't expecting any other way. And that gave me a safety net. So it meant that when I did take the leap, I didn't need to stress about having to get clients right away. Like if I could see that, say like after 4 months, if after 4 months of going full time, I wasn't getting any clients or nothing was coming in, I had a financial buffer that would keep me safe for that length of time. And I'll probably always keep that buffer to one side just as a backup. But because I don't have that financial pressure, it's allowed me to try things, experiment with things. But you know what? I've been amazed. Like we've been the world's totally changed since March because of COVID-19. I've had friends that have lost all of their clients. They've had to shut down their business and all that sort of stuff. But I've been really lucky that running my business over the last 4 months, it's been incredible. I've been working with so many different clients, and if the momentum keeps going as it is during a pandemic, then I don't see any reason why it won't succeed ongoing. So I feel like I did it at the right time for me personally, and the company that I worked with previously, they actually furloughed all their staff not long afterwards. So I feel like it was the right time to do it. And even though I say I wish I did it 5 years ago, actually I did it at the right time for me. I was ready. So
Ian Paget from logogeek.com and .co.uk, thank you very much for your time. I can't wait to see you again in person.
Thanks, Bob. It's really great to properly chat with you, and thank you to everyone that's listened. It's been really great fun.
I hope you got as much out of that interview as I did. Ian is such a great example of an action taker. Success lives in action taken consistently. Consistency and action taken over time allow you to build and refine your skills, your knowledge, and your confidence. And Ian's story is a wonderful example of that. If you don't take those first blundering steps, get over your own ego, and allow yourself to suck for a while, success will always be out of reach. Take those steps, and it can go way faster than you think. Before I go, just a quick reminder to subscribe, and if you haven't already, join our Facebook group. You can find a link in the show notes or just visit amplifyme.fm/insiders. I would love for you to connect with me on social media. You can follow me wherever you hang out. You'll find me at Bob Gentle. And if you do, then message me, let me know, and I can follow you back. More than anything, I would love for you to join me over on YouTube. I have a whole different bunch of content there, and YouTube's very new for me, so every single subscriber is frankly golden, and I would cherish every single one. If you enjoyed the show, then I'd love for you to review it on iTunes. It means a lot to me, and it's the best way to help me reach more podcast subscribers. My name's Bob Gentle. Thanks again to Ian for giving us his time this week, and to you for listening, and I'll see you next week.